Okay, so I'm gonna talk about this in the most general space, in the general concept that I can. So this whole Kendrick being canceled situation is a weird thing to me, right? Because they're like, okay, Kendrick is the voice for the people. He's always about being Kendrick is always against going against the culture or calling out the culture and what the culture does. Now I find this a little funny because people are saying that Kendrick is wrong for putting Kodak on his album, which okay, that that might be true, right? But I think we have to look at the overall thing, right? Like I think and I'm not here to argue either side. I could argue either side, but I'm not here to argue either side. I'm just here to talk about the issue, right? Because the issue is Kodak allegedly um, had something happen with this girl, and so and he pleaded guilty on something, but it wasn't the actual charge. He pleaded to something that had less time, right? So allegedly, so we're gonna say allegedly all the time, but we're gonna talk about it, and I'm gonna talk why this whole thing seems weird to me that people are like, we're gonna cancel Kendrick because of this, right? So, and you know what? That's gonna sound very hypocritical from coming from me, right? But it's a weird thing, right? Because believe he was on a Lotto song earlier this year. Kodak was on a Lotto song this year. He was on. He was on one of Future's song. Was it? I think he was on Voodoo of Future's album, right? And then he was on a song with he had Dirk on a feature on one of his songs, right? And I guess the issue is that people believe that Kendrick is the voice of like the people, right? And I think I get that to a degree, but I think we have to understand that um Kendrick majority of his album was about forgiveness, like being able to take the forgiveness or receive forgiveness from people, right? About cheating allegations, religion. I think that's generally what the whole thing was about. Him being able to forgive, right? I think that's the Mr. Moral part of the album where he's just like, hey, all I'm asking is for forgiveness, and I'm trying to forgive, that situation where he says he couldn't be Kanye and Drake or when they fix their ties. I think that's literally all it is. Like I believe that's all it is, and I think Black being on Kendrick's album, if I'm not wrong, 3 or 4 times, and I think that hurts a lot of people because people wonder if the music industry is holding people accountable. And I want to say, okay, then if we're holding people accountable, right? Do we hold Future? Do we hold? And people are gonna say, well, Future and Kendrick are different artists. Okay, they're different because they make club mixes. But are we gonna talk about their differences because they are music artists? And I think that's my problem with this thing. This thing is if you have enough fame or you have enough or you're more recognized than the other person, then you're gonna get the slack for it. And I think that's what happened to Kendrick. Kendrick played Mr. Moral and tried to create forgiveness in the air for everybody. So that's why you see Kodak on a few songs, right? Now, if you see it as okay, he put him on the most anticipated album of the year, and he pleaded guilty to an allegation, right? Or he pleaded guilty to something that was minor in the case, right? Because that whole case, you can go look it up. The case is very in detail, but I'm gonna use assume, and I'm not going to the legal case of it. But something happened between those two, right? And pleaded to something like less with less time, right? So I wonder. Okay, so my thing is, do we hold artists that are so? Okay, because this whole situation bothers me because of the simple fact is Lotto has had him on one of her songs this year, I believe. Future has for sure. There's a clip surfacing. If you go look it up on YouTube, where Drake's dancing to a Kodak song, right? But I think that's the thing. If a person makes club mixes, or can we separate? He makes club mixes, right? Or he makes dancing music, right? And then are we holding people accountable, right? And I think this is my problem and this brings up another problem that I've always wondered, and I've never got a real answer on it. And it's a lot of it just depends on the artist, right? Or it depends on the craft of music they make. Can we separate the music from the artist? Now, a lot of people will say we can't because of many different situations. But people aren't holding Kendrick like extremely accountable for him admitting that he cheated, right? Like that's the thing. Like we've had situations where enough artists have done something allegedly, and people are okay with it. There's a certain group of people that are okay with it, or can separate them from the music, and then there's people that just can't and feel that him giving Kodak Black a spotlight is helping Kodak in some way, which either or could be the case. I mean, we could argue that a feature on a Kendrick Lamar album, or a feature from Kendrick Lamar pays you in the long run, right? We could argue that for days. I don't think anybody would disagree that if you have a Kendrick feature, you're basically a made man in the industry, right? Like that by far. I think that's without a doubt. I think we can all agree on that, right? But then we have to know that Kendrick doesn't do a lot of features. So for him to be a feature on your album, we would have to typically talk about that. Now in the rap industry, Kendrick Lamar's features are very on a very low side of the artist that he is. It's $250,000. That's a low bar. If you ask me for it, if you say how much would you charge for a Kendrick feature, I'd go $450, right? Like I think that's acceptable, but I think that's the overall problem is. So you put Kodak on a Kodak on your song. So are you going to be on Kodak's album when Kodak drops his new album? And I think that is my problem of. There are a lot of artists that have allegedly done things, but people don't hold them accountable, right? But people can separate it from the music. For example, not to get anybody in trouble, allegedly, Trey Songz, right? Like Trey Songz, you can listen to Trey Songz music without worrying about too much, right? But Trey Songz himself has never been canceled, right? I'm going to stay away from that other case, the R&B artist case. I'm gonna stay away from that. But I think overall, like this brings into a discussion that I've been wanting to have for years: is can we separate the artist from the music? And for some people, that's an easy right? Like people have done it before. But this time might be a little different. I don't necessarily know. Like I think people can separate Melly's music from what he has allegedly done or the trial that he's having now, right? I think people can. Separate the two, right? Like, some people can, some people can't, and I think that's fine. Whichever camp you ride in, whatever camp you decide to see yourself in. No, if the artist lives it, they're telling a story. Then they're telling a story about their life to their fans, and we can't separate the two. That's fine, but I want to hold people accountable, like Future or Lotto that had Kodak on their album recently this year, right? And we're not through the whole year yet, so we don't know if Kodak's gonna be on more features. But then where do we go from here? If we can't separate the music from the artist, then where do we go from here, right? Because there are a lot of artists that, in theory, we shouldn't be listening to their music because of what they allegedly rumored to do, right? Like I think that's my stance on it, right? And I don't think Kendrick should be canceled, right? But I think that's kind of because I can separate the two. I'm very known to separate what they have done, what has been rumored, or what has been assumed from the music they make, and I think without a doubt that rubs a few people the wrong way. But I'm not really sure if I can go, I'm for sure he did this, right? I'm for sure he did this even before the case is over with. Like I can't do it. So I can associate, like there are definitely artists that I'm like, what they did is what they did. That's fine. If the crime is severe enough, I get it. I'm not gonna, listen to it. But majority of the time, I can separate the two. But and this thing is the labels. Do they push it out? Right? Because Kodak has an album. And a funny example of this is does the label hold artists accountable? And a great example of this is the difference between Melly, Tory, and Kodak. Right? Like, I think Kodak still gets some, like, push behind his albums. Tory Lanez gets a little bit. Melly, when he dropped his last two, it wasn't really big promotion behind it, but it was promotion behind it. Tory doesn't get that, right? And now one can all say that all of these three cases are different, but do we hold them accountable? Because they're still able to make music, and I know people will say, well, they have a 4 or 5 deal contract with the record company, and if they don't make these deals, then they don't get paid or they don't get out of the contracts, right? But if we're holding people accountable for what the actions that they did, then they shouldn't be able to get features, they shouldn't be able to get this, right? But then is their whole other catalog, their music they made before these allegations, is it irrelevant, or do we have to, or do we just sit there and go, well, they did it, they admitted to it, or they didn't admit to it, or, they deny it, and do we just wait for the trial to end before we make our opinions, which I think is what we should be doing, to be fair. I think that's probably the best way to do it is, okay, so they're set for this, okay, so then let's see how the full case turns out and how the verdict turns out, and then we make our decisions that way. If your team cancel all their music, or if your team, hey, I can separate the two. But I think with social media, I think it's very hard for people to go, well, I can separate the two, right? Because some of these cases get so much push. And I think Kodak's didn't get so much push, so people kind of forgot about it after the first couple weeks. And so it wasn't really mainstream, right? But it's okay, so it's hard for me to say without a doubt that I'm either one way or another, because it's music, right? Or it's a lifestyle, right? And a lot of artists / rappers are just performing, or, PR teams will tell you that, you're supposed to have a certain image. I don't know, because if Twitter tries to cancel Kendrick, or the music industry tries to cancel Kendrick for adding Kodak Black, I don't know. I think I see it as the record labels being hypocritical because they've let other people do other stuff and then be found in a certain way in the court of law and still let them put music out without blackballing him. And I'm not trying to call any record labels out. That's not the point of this. But as music fans, where do we draw the line? Do we draw the line of music is just music, or it's a lifestyle that they're living to promote an album, which comes back to this law that they've been trying to push. They've been trying to push this law of they're going to use your lyrics in your song about you. Any lyrics that you make, they can use that in the court of law, which I think that's what Melly is facing right now. I'm not too sure, but does that open the line up to people going, okay, well, we have to exaggerate it, and to some extent, people will argue that rap is still exaggerated to this day. There aren't many rappers that do what they claim they do, right? But I guess that's my thing. My thing is, can we separate it? Because I think I can separate the music from the artist and their crime or whatever they do, right? But I know there's a lot of people that's like, well, if they do this, then my image of them is tainted, right? And I'm not saying that people on this side also say, well, I can separate the two, but their image isn't tainted. Their image is definitely tainted. But I'm not really sure if I can go, okay, I can't listen to their music no more because of the situation that they did. Like I can separate them. I can separate them a few, right? But I wonder, can people separate the two, or is it just if their image is tainted, their whole catalog becomes irrelevant, everything becomes irrelevant, and we're just can't listen to artists no more because it's irrelevant. And if that's the case, right, then I think I understand that Tory situation of people saying that. But if it's we can separate the two. It just depends on how big of an artist you are. That seems a little biased to me, because a lot of artists that do it, they either do it when they're a smaller artist, when they're starting out, or it just happens by chance, right? I'm just curious. I'm extremely curious. I'm curious on that because it's a weird thing to talk about, but I'm never really sure where people stand. Like if people stand, okay, yeah, because I can never figure that out. Like I think I understand where the criticism is coming from, the Kodak the Kodak thing, because a lot of people are saying that they can't like, or they can't stand with Kendrick because he does it. He kind of trying to like cosigns Kodak Black, but behind the scenes we don't know if he got paid for that feature or he got paid to get put on it. I'm just saying the whole image of Mr. Mortal is to kind of show forgiveness, and I think we got forgiving Kodak and forgiving Kendrick Lamar, but I'm not entirely sure if everyone feels that way or why. Like can they separate the artist and his music, or is it just okay? Their image is tainted, so their music is tainted. I'm just curious. I always want to know. So let me know.